Nyasha arrived in Kiwanda village with hope in her heart. She had married Boma, the man she loved, and she believed that love would be enough to build a happy life. But from the very first day, she could feel the sharp eyes of Mama Kanzia, her new mother-in-law, watching her with disapproval. Mama Kanzia was a powerful woman, respected by everyone in the village. She was known for her sharp tongue and strong will, and no one dared to question her decisions. To Mama Kanzia, Nyasha was not good enough. She came from a poor family, and in her eyes, a woman like Nyasha had no place in her household. She had hoped that Boma would marry someone from a wealthier, more influential family, someone she could boast about to the village. But instead, he had chosen Nyasha, a simple girl, with nothing but a kind heart. Mama Kanzia made no effort to hide her disappointment. From the moment Nyasha stepped into the house, Mama Kanzia made her life difficult. She woke her up before dawn to fetch water from the river, even when other women were still asleep. She forced her to sweep every corner of the compound, cook all the meals, and serve everyone before she could eat. And even after all her hard work, Mama Kanzia would always find something wrong. "The food is too salty," she would shout. "You clean like a lazy child," she would complain. Nyasha never spoke back. She believed that if she showed kindness and patience, Mama Kanzia would eventually accept her. But instead, things only got worse. Mama Kanzia would insult her in front of visitors, calling her useless and slow. She would send her to the market without giving her enough money, then scold her for not buying enough food. Even when Boma was around, he said nothing. At first, he would comfort her at night, telling her to be strong. But over time, he started to change. Nyasha could feel the distance growing between them. Boma no longer defended her. He stopped noticing when she was tired, stopped asking if she had eaten. It was as if Mama Kanzia's words had poisoned his heart against her. And no matter how hard Nyasha tried, nothing she did was ever enough. But she still held on, believing that one day things would get better. She had no idea that the worst was yet to come. Nyasha's days were filled with pain, but she never complained. From morning till night, she worked tirelessly, doing everything Mama Kanzia ordered her to do. She washed clothes, cooked meals, cleaned the house, and fetched water from the river. Yet no matter how hard she tried, nothing was ever good enough. Mama Kanzia would always find a reason to insult her. "You are as slow as a sick goat," she would say. "Did no one teach you how to be a proper wife?" Nyasha never spoke back. She kept her head down and did what was asked of her, believing that if she remained patient, Mama Kanzia would one day soften her heart. But days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, and things only got worse. The insults became crueler, the work became harder, and the love she once felt from Boma began to fade. At first, Boma would comfort her in private, telling her to be strong. "My mother is just like that," he would say. "She will get used to you." But as time passed, he began to change. He no longer defended her when Mama Kanzia scolded her. When Nyasha tried to tell him about her struggles, he would sigh and shake his head. "You complain too much," he started saying. Then, one day, he stopped listening altogether. Nyasha could feel the love slipping away from her marriage, but she held on, hoping that things would change. She reminded herself that she had left her family to be with Boma, and she had to make her marriage work. So she endured the mistreatment in silence, hoping that one day, her kindness and patience would be enough to win their hearts. But deep down, a part of her was slowly breaking. Nyasha had endured enough. For months, she had suffered in silence, hoping that one day, Mama Kanzia would treat her with kindness. But nothing changed. Instead, things only got worse. One evening, after a long and tiring day, Mama Kanzia scolded her yet again, calling her useless in front of the entire household. Something inside Nyasha broke. For the first time, she lifted her head and spoke. "Mama, I have tried my best to be a good wife to your son. I have respected you, worked hard, and never complained. Why do you hate me so much? What have I done to deserve this?" The room fell silent. The servants stopped what they were doing, and even Boma looked up in shock. No one had ever dared to question Mama Kanzia before. But instead of showing remorse, the old woman laughed. A cold, bitter laugh. "You dare speak back to me," she sneered. "You, a girl with nothing. You think you deserve my respect?" Before Nyasha could say another word, Mama Kanzia stood up, her frail hands trembling, her face twisted with anger as she pointed at Nyasha. "You shall never know peace," she spat. "The day you smile again will be the day your world turns to dust." A heavy silence filled the air. The words sent a chill through Nyasha's body, but she refused to believe in them. It was just the angry outburst of a bitter woman, nothing more. She shook her head and walked away, refusing to let fear control her heart. But deep inside, something about Mama Kanzia's voice unsettled her. That very night, the old woman fell gravely ill. She could barely speak, and her strength faded quickly. Within days, she was gone. The village mourned her, but in her final moments, she never took back her words. Her curse remained, lingering in the air like a shadow over Nyasha's life. After Mama Kanzia's passing, a strange sense of peace settled over the household. For the first time since she arrived in Kiwanda village, Nyasha could wake up without the fear of being insulted or ordered around like a servant. The house, once filled with Mama Kanzia's sharp voice, felt quieter, almost lighter. Boma, now free from his mother's influence, began to see things clearly. He regretted the way he had treated Nyasha, realizing how much pain he had caused her. He started speaking to her with kindness, helping her with small tasks, and even bringing her little gifts from the market. At first, Nyasha was cautious. She had spent so long enduring his coldness that she found it hard to believe he had truly changed. But as the days passed, she saw the sincerity in his eyes. He was trying to make things right. Then, one morning, Nyasha woke up feeling strange. She felt tired all the time and could barely eat without feeling sick. The village women noticed the change and exchanged knowing smiles. It wasn't long before the news spread. Nyasha was pregnant. The entire village rejoiced. For years, people had whispered that Mama Kanzia's mistreatment would prevent Nyasha from ever having children. But now, she was carrying a child, a sign of hope and new beginnings. Women came to visit her, bringing gifts and herbs to ensure a safe pregnancy. Even elders, who had once remained silent about her suffering, now praised her strength and resilience. For the first time in a long while, Nyasha felt truly happy. She imagined holding her child in her arms, raising them with love, and finally, living the peaceful life she had always dreamed of. It seemed that, at last, her patience and suffering had led to something beautiful. She had no idea that the happiness she was feeling would not last. Not long after Nyasha's pregnancy was confirmed, strange things began to happen. At first, it was small, almost unnoticeable. One of their cows fell sick and refused to eat. But soon, more cattle began to die, one after another, without any sign of disease. The family, once proud owners of the healthiest livestock in the village, was left with only a few weak animals. Then, Boma's business, which had always been successful, suddenly collapsed. Traders who once trusted him stopped coming. A large shipment of goods he had invested in was stolen on the way to the market. Debt piled up quickly, and soon he had nothing left. As if that wasn't enough, their farmland, which had always been fertile, dried up. The crops withered under the sun, and no matter how much they tried to save them, nothing would grow. The villagers began to talk. "This is no ordinary misfortune," they whispered. "Something unnatural is at work." Some shook their heads, refusing to believe in curses, but others were certain. Mama Kanzia's last words were not empty threats, the elders muttered. She spoke with the bitterness of the ancestors. Her spirit is not at rest. Nyasha tried to remain strong, telling herself that these were just coincidences, a test of faith. But deep in her heart, fear began to creep in. Had Mama Kanzia's curse truly taken root? Was there something haunting their home, waiting to destroy everything she had built? As the misfortunes continued, fear began to take hold of Boma. He was no longer the loving husband who had once tried to make up for his past mistakes. Instead, he became restless, his mind filled with worry and doubt. The whispers in the village grew louder, and soon he started believing them. "It all started after Mama's death," he muttered to himself. Maybe her spirit is angry." At first, he tried to ignore the thoughts, but every time another problem arose, the loss of another cow, the failure of another business deal, his frustration grew. Slowly, his warmth toward Nyasha faded. He stopped speaking to her with kindness. He spent more time away from home, coming back late at night with the smell of palm wine on his breath. Jabari, Boma's childhood friend, saw the change and took advantage of it. He had never liked Nyasha and had always believed Boma could have married someone better. So, when the villagers spoke of the curse, Jabari added fuel to the fire. "She brought this misfortune," he whispered to Boma one evening. "Mama Kanzia warned you. Her last words were not ordinary. You should never have married Nyasha." Boma tried to ignore him, but Jabari's words planted a seed of doubt in his heart. Each time he looked at Nyasha, he saw the face of a woman who had brought ruin to his once perfect life. The love he once felt for her was slowly being replaced by resentment. Nyasha noticed the change. She saw the way Boma avoided her eyes, how he barely spoke to her anymore. She knew he was blaming her, but she didn't know how to stop it. The man she had once trusted was slipping away, and there was nothing she could do to bring him back. One night, after another terrible argument, Boma finally did what Nyasha had feared the most. His face twisted with anger, his voice sharp like a blade. "Get out!" he shouted. "You are the reason for all of this. My mother was right. You have cursed my life." Nyasha's heart shattered. She looked at the man she had once loved, hoping to see even a flicker of the kindness he had once shown her. But there was nothing, only coldness in his eyes. "Boma, please," she begged, holding her swollen belly. "I have nowhere to go." "I don't care," he spat. "Leave my house and take your bad luck with you." Tears streamed down Nyasha's face as she walked away, her legs trembling beneath her. She had never felt so alone. The village that once celebrated her pregnancy now looked at her with fear. No one opened their doors for her. Mothers pulled their children away when she passed, whispering that she carried misfortune. With nowhere else to go, she stumbled toward the river, where an old abandoned hut stood. It was a place where no one dared to live. Rumors of spirits kept people away. But Nyasha had no choice. She sat inside, wrapping her arms around her belly, whispering prayers into the darkness. The cold wind howled through the cracks in the walls, but it was nothing compared to the emptiness in her heart. She had lost everything: her home, her husband, her dignity. The only thing keeping her alive was the life growing inside her. "I will not give up," she whispered, wiping her tears. "I will not let this curse break me." But deep down, she couldn't ignore the question haunting her mind. Was Mama Kanzia's curse real? Had she truly been doomed from the start? On a cold and lonely night, deep inside the abandoned hut, Nyasha's labor pains began. She clutched her belly, biting her lips to keep from screaming. There was no one to help her, no loving hands to hold hers, no warm voice to guide her through the pain, just the walls of the crumbling hut and the distant sound of the river flowing outside. But fate had not completely turned away from her. Just before dawn, an old woman with deep wrinkles and kind eyes stepped into the hut. Mama Mbali, the village healer, had heard of Nyasha's suffering and could not let her bring a child into the world alone. "Push, my child," Mama Mbali whispered, her voice both gentle and strong. "You are not alone." With one final cry, Nyasha felt relief wash over her. The cries of a newborn filled the hut, breaking through the silence of the night. Mama Mbali wrapped the tiny baby in a soft cloth and placed him in Nyasha's trembling arms. "It's a boy," she said with a smile. "A strong one." Nyasha looked down at her son, his little fingers curling around hers. Despite all the pain, all the loss, her heart swelled with love. She named him Zivai, meaning knowledge, a reminder that wisdom could overcome even the darkest of days. As Mama Mbali watched mother and child, she placed a gentle hand on Nyasha's shoulder. "My dear," she said softly, "curses are only as strong as the fear they create. The heart that loves truly can break any chain." Nyasha held on to those words, gripping them like a lifeline. She had lost everything, but in her arms, she held hope. And as little Zivai's tiny eyes fluttered open for the first time, she made a silent promise. No matter what, she would fight. For him, for herself, for a future beyond the shadow of Mama Kanzia's curse. After casting Nyasha out, Boma believed life would return to normal. He convinced himself that his mother's curse had left with her, that the dark cloud over his home would finally disappear. To prove he had moved on, he quickly married Bahati, a woman known for her beauty, but not for her kindness. At first, Boma felt a sense of victory. He had a new wife, a fresh start. But soon, strange misfortunes began to unfold. His cattle, already weakened by unexplained sickness, died one after the other. His once prosperous business fell into ruin, with traders refusing to work with him. Bahati, unlike Nyasha, had no patience for struggle. She spent whatever little money remained on herself, showing no concern for the household. The village itself was not spared. The sky, once generous with rain, turned empty and dry. The river that had always provided fresh water shrank day by day. Crops withered before they could be harvested. Hunger crept into homes, turning neighbors against each other. Whispers spread through the village. Some blamed Boma, saying he had invited misfortune by mistreating a good woman. Others believed Mama Kanzia's curse had spread beyond his home, punishing them all. Boma, once proud and confident, now walked with his head lowered. His new wife sneered at him, calling him weak, but he no longer had the strength to argue. He had lost control of everything. One night, as he sat outside his crumbling house, staring at the dry land before him, a thought gnawed at his mind. Had he made the biggest mistake of his life? One evening, as Nyasha sat outside the small hut, rocking little Zivai in her arms, Mama Mbali joined her. The old healer had been her only friend in these dark times, offering not just food and shelter, but also wisdom and comfort. You still fear her words, don't you? Mama Mbali asked gently. Nyasha lowered her eyes. I try not to, but every time something bad happens, I hear her voice again. The day you smile again will be the day your world turns to dust. Mama Mbali sighed and shook her head. My child, do you know the greatest trick fear plays on the mind? It makes you believe in chains that aren't even there. Nyasha looked at her in confusion. What do you mean? The old woman placed a hand on her shoulder. Mama Kanzia's words held no real power. Curses are not magic, Nyasha. They are nothing but the poison of a bitter heart. What destroyed Boma's house was not a curse. It was greed, cruelty, and bad choices. And what happened to the village? That was not your doing. That was the result of men forgetting kindness, forgetting respect for the land, forgetting what truly matters. Nyasha's breath caught in her throat. Could it really be true? Had she spent all this time running from a ghost that had no power over her? You were never cursed, Nyasha, Mama Mbali continued. You were mistreated. And now, you must decide. Will you let fear keep you in hiding? Or will you stand up and reclaim what is rightfully yours? Nyasha looked down at little Zivai, peacefully sleeping in her arms. He was innocent in all this. He deserved a future, not one clouded by superstition and shame, but one built on strength and truth. She lifted her head, a new fire in her eyes. I will not run anymore, she whispered. I will return. For the first time in a long while, she felt light. The weight of Mama Kanzia's words no longer pressed down on her. She was not cursed. She had never been. It was time to take back her dignity. Nyasha walked through the familiar paths of Kiwanda village, her son Zivai holding tightly to her hand. The village had changed. What was once a lively and thriving place now felt dull and broken. The drought had left the land dry, and the people looked weary, their faces etched with suffering. But Nyasha no longer carried fear in her heart. She had returned, not as the broken woman who was cast out, but as someone who had found her strength. She did not go to Boma's house first. Instead, she went to the people who needed her most, the hungry, the sick, the forgotten. With the healing knowledge she had learned from Mama Mbali, she treated wounds, shared herbs, and helped mothers care for their weak children. People who once turned away from her now watched in awe as she worked tirelessly, her kindness shining brighter than any superstition. Word spread quickly through the village. Nyasha was back, and she was not the bringer of curses, but of blessings. Some came to her hesitantly, whispering apologies for abandoning her. Others openly wept, ashamed of how they had treated her. One evening, as she was grinding herbs outside her hut, a shadow fell across her. She looked up and saw Boma standing there. He was a mere shell of the proud man he once was. His clothes were worn, his eyes sunken with regret. Nyasha, he whispered, his voice hoarse. She did not respond immediately. She only watched him, waiting. He fell to his knees before her, his hands trembling. I was wrong. I believed in lies. I listened to fear. I threw away the best thing in my life, and now I have nothing. His voice broke. Please, forgive me. Nyasha looked at him for a long moment. She thought of the pain he had caused, the loneliness, the betrayal, but she also thought of Zivai, of the future she wanted to build, one not burdened by hatred. She exhaled softly. I do not hold hate in my heart, Boma, she said, but forgiveness is not just words. It is proven through actions. Boma nodded eagerly. I will prove it. I will spend the rest of my days making up for what I did. Nyasha did not reply, but she saw the desperation in his eyes. Whether he truly changed or not, only time would tell. But she had already made peace with her past. She had returned, not for revenge, but for redemption, and she had already won. The people of Kiwanda village had always whispered about curses and fate, but now they began to see the truth with their own eyes. Nyasha had returned, not as a woman carrying misfortune, but as a beacon of hope. She had been cast out in shame, yet here she was, lifting others up with her kindness and wisdom. The villagers watched as Nyasha helped the sick, shared food with the hungry, and brought peace where there had been fear. Slowly, their beliefs started to change. They realized that misfortune had not followed Nyasha. It had followed those who had wronged her. Boma, once the village's proud and respected son, was now nothing but a broken man, left with regrets and loneliness. His new wife, Bahati, had abandoned him when things got worse, taking whatever wealth he had left. The home that once stood tall with pride was now empty, a reminder of his mistakes. The villagers saw that his downfall was not caused by a curse, but by his own cruelty and blindness. As time passed, the village itself began to heal. With Nyasha's return, a new sense of hope spread among the people. They worked together again, planting crops, sharing food, and caring for one another. The land, once dry and lifeless, slowly regained its strength. The rains returned, and so did the laughter of children in the fields. People who had once feared Nyasha now sought her wisdom. They realized that karma was not some unseen force of punishment. It was simply the consequences of their actions. Boma had lost everything because of his choices, while Nyasha, who had remained kind despite everything, had found happiness again. The village elders gathered one day and spoke before everyone. We were blinded by fear. We believed in curses instead of the truth. But today, we see clearly. Nyasha was never cursed. She was wronged, yet she forgave. She suffered, yet she still chose kindness. She is not a bringer of misfortune. She is a blessing to this village. And from that day forward, Kiwanda village was never the same again. The people had learned a powerful lesson. True misfortune does not come from curses, but from the harm people bring upon themselves. And true blessings come from those who choose to love, even when the world turns against them. Nyasha no longer lived in the shadows of the past. She had endured pain, betrayal, and loneliness, yet she had risen above it all. With her son, Zivai, by her side, she found a new purpose in life. She no longer sought acceptance from those who had once cast her out. Instead, she embraced the love and respect that naturally came her way. The people of Kiwanda village now looked at her with admiration. Where they had once feared her presence, they now sought her wisdom. She was no longer just the woman who had been mistreated. She was a symbol of resilience, of strength, and of hope. The elders, the same ones who had once stayed silent in her suffering, now openly honored her. They acknowledged their mistakes and praised her for proving that true power lies in kindness and patience, not in fear and superstition. As the years passed, Nyasha's life flourished. She raised Zivai with love, teaching him the values of forgiveness and wisdom. He grew into a remarkable young man, intelligent and compassionate, carrying the same spirit of resilience as his mother. The village saw his potential and knew he would one day be a great leader. Boma, once the proud son of Kiwanda, had lost everything because of his choices. His regret was his greatest punishment, and though Nyasha forgave him, he could never undo the pain he had caused. The so-called curse that had haunted the village had never been real, yet karma had indeed taken its course. It had shown everyone that the true enemy was not magic or spirits. It was cruelty, greed, and ignorance. But Nyasha did not dwell on the past. She had fought her battles and won, not through revenge, but through patience and love. And as she looked out over the village, watching the children play, the crops flourish, and the people laugh once again, she knew that this was a new beginning, not just for her, but for everyone.